If you've never really experienced a broadcast from that angle of actually seeing it happen, this thing, the replay machine, kind of looks like something from Star Wars.
I've learned that one of the most important jobs is if Caden's calling a game and I'm on the replay machine and I sense that he's maybe just a little confused what happened or doesn't quite remember the whole picture, then I'm absolutely rewinding to try and help him out.
If you're in house, we need the fan to get back into the game. I mean, talking from a production manager perspective, we want that replay because we want the fan to get on their feet and make more noise.
Ready, three, take three. How high will I keep counting? You'll just have to stick around to find out. Everybody, welcome back to the Broadcast Podcast, the show where we talk about sports broadcast production. This week, we'll be discussing the impact that replay operators have on your favorite broadcasts. Providing their insight are Bradley Sports Communication grad, Joshua Messenger, future SportsCom grad, Caden Sexton, and I'm also another SportsCom grad from Bradley. We'll be discussing, like I said, the replay machine, a brief history, and talking about the importance of replay to the broadcast. And let's just jump into it. Replays and broadcasts aren't something that you see very often, but when they appear on your screen, it really provides another angle of the action. They usually appear when an impressive play happens, a foul, or anything that would warrant a second look for both the broadcasters and the viewers alike. Josh, I believe you've done the most replay out of all of us. Why don't you run us through the replay machine? The finer details and some of the buttons that you'll find on that.
Yeah, I always like to say that replay is the least critical part of a broadcast, but it adds the most value to any broadcast. We've all seen shows before where the replay wasn't in use and you probably didn't notice necessarily, or at least have a conscious thought that, hey, this would be much better with replay. But we've also all seen big shows that have replays that really add a lot of value and contribute to the story that's being told. So for the guys back in the truck, I think on bigger shows, there's usually one or two. For the sake of our discussion, we'll stick with one because that's the only shows that we've worked on. And they have the replay machine, which is effectively a couple of channels. We're used to having two channels with the games that we work. We call them A and B, and it's basically almost like being an omnipotent kind of third-party viewer of the action, because you can rewind time, you can freeze, you can go in slow motion, you can view any single point from the game from any angle that you want, not in real time, and then you get to communicate that and ship it off back to the broadcast. So the key in each game that replay is being done is just adding as much perspective as you can to the game, catching moments that were missed, adding alternate angles that weren't there before. And so the greatest tool that I think for that is it has to be the zoom lever, the speed lever, because that determines how fast you're going. If you want to show live action almost or mimic that, then you're going to go full speed. If you want to go a little bit slower, frame by frame, then you can slow it way down. Those are two very different kind of capabilities that a zoom lever has. And most of the time, you're going to stick it somewhere in the middle, slow enough where you can really comprehend and see what's developing kind of moment by moment, but fast enough to where it's not like a super detailed look that only hones in on one specific thing.
Yeah, if replay operators were a type of monster, it would be a monster with many eyes. Realistically, you need to be able to see all the different angles, and it gets kind of tough, especially when you're working in that sports environment where everything is so fast. Josh, we've both done replay, and Caden as well has done replay a good amount of times, where some sports, you really don't have much of an opportunity to get your replay in before the next thing goes on.
Yeah, any sport that has plays, football, volleyball are probably the two that come to mind the most. Those are ones that you know they're going to reload instantly, and there's going to be something else that is replay worthy that happens immediately afterwards. So you got to get whatever shot you're looking to get, you got to get it in, and you got to get in fast. So you got to find what you're looking for, find the best angle, shoot it over to the director, and then integrate it into the broadcast as fast as possible. Other sports, you have a little more leeway. You wait for a dead ball, perhaps, but some sports is really go, go, go. And in others, it's kind of picking and choosing the moments that you want to show from the past handful of minutes where you didn't have the option to do so.
We've definitely all had instances where we're just going, we got our replay ready, it looks great, and then immediately something even better happens. So then you kind of have to pivot really fast. and focus on that other thing. And you can save that clip for later. I think Josh mentioned it for the open, for not the open because we'd be already in the game, but for after the game, the highlight reel at the end where you're really able to do some storytelling.
Yeah, I think that the ability to clip off and save for later is also a pretty important skill that you don't realize goes into it necessarily, because everyone sees the moment that happens, the single replay that's live. But it's also pretty important to have a backlog of things that you can show if need be. If a player really pops off in the second half of a game, for example, they score a lot of points, then that's a good opportunity to kind of throw together a bunch of clips, make a brief little reel, send it on air. And that just tells the story, reminds the audience that this player has been doing something really amazing in the second half, adds to the story. Basketball is probably the biggest example of kind of keeping and dumping clips, like you said, Rodrigo, because like sometimes the play can go on for 4 or 5 minutes of game time in a row before there's a break of any sort. So it's constantly, oh, that was a bucket, I'm going to save that, and I'm going to save that one. Oh, I'm out of channels, so the next time something happens, then I got to figure out which one to dump, and you just keep going and going and going. Try to clip off and save as many as you can in the process, but at the end, you can only show one, or in our case, only one or two. In, of course, more professional broadcast case with larger machines and larger volume, then they can store 3 or 4 or even more. But in our case, it's a pretty selective business.
If you've never really experienced a broadcast from that angle of actually seeing it happen, this thing, the replay machine, kind of looks like something from Star Wars. With the lever and the buttons, it's kind of out of this world how cool this sort of technology is. It's definitely not something that you can pick up right away. There definitely is a bit of a learning curve. But Josh, I know when I did my first game, I was maybe saving a handful of clips here and there, just trying to get used to the whole system.
Trying to tread water, yeah.
Exactly. You don't want to do too much early on, and I don't think you can do too much early on unless you have a good amount of practice before you get through that first game. But like we've mentioned it on this podcast before, usually when you get into the broadcast world, you're kind of just thrown into these positions without much of practice. It's just learn on the spot, getting thrown into the water, and just learn how to swim.
The best way to learn is definitely getting chucked into the deep end, and that's true with basically every position, because in the heat of the moment, that's the best time to learn.
Going back to that first game, did you have a similar experience, Josh?
Oh yeah, first time I ever did replay, probably 3 or 4 years ago now. I think it was a volleyball game. Volleyball is one of those where it's just rinse and repeat every single point. So the short time frame, probably we're talking 10 seconds from the end of the point to the next serve, 10 to 15 seconds. It was almost impossible for me to get anything in at first because it just took me a while to kind of find exactly where I wanted to set it and to get a feel for it. And, once you've done it enough, especially for volleyball, kind of you're just going to replay whatever the last 2 or 3 hits were before the ball goes out of bounds, usually. So that's just a flick of the wheel, and wherever it lands, that's where you go because you have enough of a touch with it.
Yeah, Caden, what about your first experience? I know you haven't done replay as much as us, but you had a first, right?
Yeah, my first was for a Peoria Rivermen hockey game. That one isn't one where you need to save things off for a post-game rollout, but you do need to save clips for the hit of the game, the shot of the game, and then the play of the game. Again, I haven't done it in a couple months, so I could be remembering the 3 wrong, but I vividly remember the one thing. The first thing you needed in that reel and again, the reel was at the last 5 minutes of the third period. The first thing you needed was the hit of the game. Well, we were 55 minutes into a hockey game, and there was no hitting. And again, Peoria Rivermen, no hitting. It was a first for everybody. And so the director's trying to just sell stuff. He's just like, all right, camera 3, you just got to get any kind of wimpy hit just so Caden has something. And it wasn't because I was missing getting clips. It was genuinely because it was that hard of a day to find a hit of the game. We watched 2 periods of, we'll get a better one, we'll get a better one. And then the third period was, oh crap, we need something. But other than that, Rodrigo, it was a lot of fun that first time. It was a lot of just figuring things out on the fly. I feel like there was one goal that I spun the wheel back a little bit too far, and we weren't able to get the full replay in before play resumed. But other than that, it was a great first day, and it made me want to come back and do it again the next day.
Oh, we've definitely had those instances where we spin it a little bit too far back, and you're just waiting for the play to happen, and it's just doesn't come.
The play's
It doesn't
coming, I
come.
swear.
Exactly. Director's yelling at you, like, "Where's the play? It's not happening." It's even worse when you've done a little slow motion on it. Then you really just gotta, okay, we gotta do a little bit faster,
Just
or else we're never gonna get to
absolute
the play.
eternity of just waiting for it to happen.
Exactly. But yeah, that's pretty similar to what I was experiencing that first game. Honestly, I don't even remember what that first game was. It's a really fun position, though, for some reasons that we're going to talk a little bit farther into the episode. Mainly the storytelling aspect of being able to be a director in a different sense than what we're used to as sports broadcast production people. But moving on, let's learn a little bit about the history of the replay machine. Obviously, this isn't something that's been around since the start of sports broadcast and the start of camera operation, but it definitely has its history. Caden, why don't you get us started with this? Talk to us a little bit about the history of the replay machine.
Yeah, back in the mid 1950s and up until the mid 1960s, replay was a thing, but it really wasn't. And what I mean by that is it was nothing like what it is today. Back then, there was about 10 minutes of video static as you would physically rewind that old-fashioned crank tape that you kind of see in all the movies when they're trying to depict the old-time scenes. And that really just, again, 10 seconds of static, 10 seconds of full rewind or more. 10 seconds was a low. It really wasn't built out to be an efficient model, and it really did look clunky, and it wasn't professional, but that was the best they had. Then in the 1960s, during an Army-Navy game, a young Tony Verna of CBS decided that he was going to try out some new technology to try and get or the modernized type replay into the story. And this happened a few weeks after the John F. Kennedy assassination. The game actually got delayed because JFK was such a huge Navy fan, and in his honor for the family, they decided to delay it. But basically, they used clicks and they used markings in the audio as well as on the tape to be able to signify when moments started, when the play was beginning, when the ball was snapped, when the quarterback got back, and they were able to kind of just mark things out to be able to have a quick, all right, go back to the start. All right, we can go back halfway through roughly. And that kind of started the more clear pictured, officialized replays.
Yeah, that's really smart using audio to be able to work with replays, especially at the start when, technology isn't what it is today. Because nowadays, you have 2, maybe 3 replay operators for those big productions. You have cameras all around the stadium getting every single detail there, fans, coaches, anything like that. So it's a bigger job nowadays than what it was back then.
Think about a sport like the NFL or the MLB pre-replay review. And again, we have been talking this whole broadcast about the ability to see it live and on air, but they were able to see a replay live and on air decades before officials were able to use it. And again, this is a broadcast podcast, but you have to play into mind when the viewer, whether it's in the stadium or it's at home, is able to go and look back and see, ooh, that call definitely isn't correct. And then they can't look back on it. That looks really bad on the refs, and that creates tension. I mean, there's one that you all remember. 2012 Detroit Tigers. Here's the best part. You may not remember the starting pitcher's name. You may not remember the umpire's name. You know that in the top of the 9th inning, that call at first base was steps away from being called out. And he did. It was a very clear out call, and they called him safe. He was a step off, and because the MLB did not institute replay reviews, the broadcast is showing it, but not able to do anything about it.
And that was Galarraga's perfect game, right? So that was the thing that kept him from having quite an illustrious perfect game, all due to just an unfortunate error that wasn't able to be overturned because of the era in which it was.
Yeah, I mean, when Jim Joyce made that call, the world knew that Galagara, a pitcher who was struggling to stay in the majors, who was having a perfect game, was about to have the moment of his life snatched from him because of a blown call that couldn't be looked back on. And what do? The broadcast shows it 20 times over again for the fans.
Yeah, that's one aspect that we tend to forget is the whole debate that gets sparked whenever a replay is shown on TV and it goes against what the umpire said. And it truly goes to show you the importance, the whole replay operator and the machine to the broadcast. And when we think of the replay, we normally think about the importance to the final product, what the viewer sees. But it's also an important tool for broadcasters. Caden, you have probably the most experience on the mic than all of us. Can you talk to us a little bit about how replay aids your calls?
I think the ability to talk about what's going on and then see it again really does make the show better, but it also makes the broadcasters' lives easier. I mean, think about it from this standpoint alone. If you're a viewer and you hear the broadcaster talk about, for example, over there at third base, the guy didn't cover the bag, so if he tried to take the third off of that double, he probably would have been able to get the triple. And a regular fan watching the play, not watching the cameras switch between the runner and not even seeing that, but then showing a replay that illustrates that. You know, when a broadcaster says something, it's really cool to listen to it, hear what they're saying, and divulge. But if you're able to go back and see that other camera angle, or go back and see it again in slow motion, or just see it again in general, it just enhances the broadcast, and it also allows the broadcaster to then use more or less detail depending on the situation.
Yeah, and one thing that I've done time and time again, whenever we're either working with Clutch, which doesn't have replay, or I just want a different angle, what I would do is just get my phone out, play the broadcast, because there's already a delay on the broadcast, so you're kind of able to have a artificial replay in that sense, where you're able to see plays again to better tell the story. I've done a lot more color commentary, which I think aids more for that storytelling and showing not necessarily what happened, but more why it happened. And when you're able to really slow things down for like baseball, soccer, any sport, whenever you're able to slow things down, it really allows you to be able to analyze it a little bit further than from the first glimpse that you get it. Because sometimes you see and you pick things up differently that second time that you see it opposed to that first time.
That's why good replay ops always are paying attention to the commentary and paying attention to what information the commentators have at their disposal, because there's an easy chance that maybe they missed something, maybe they saw it slightly differently than what actually happened. So I've learned that one of the most important jobs is if Caden's calling a game and I'm on the replay machine and I sense that he's maybe just a little confused what happened or doesn't quite remember the whole picture, then I'm absolutely rewinding to try and help him out and give him the best picture that he can. And even if the replay doesn't actually make error, he can still, at least in the setup that we usually work with, he can still see what's going on in my two channels that I'm messing around with. So he can still even see what's going on before it makes error. And that just helps the commentator to really sound like an expert and really have a firm grasp on what's going on. So there are a lot of ways in which replay can make a broadcast better, even if the replays don't actually make error themselves.
Yeah, and Josh is 1000% correct. I might have been looking in my notes to try and find something out about a player or this or that, and being able to see that either quick wheel spinning in that corner or a full-on replay in the screen or on the screen. Either way, it tremendously helps make me pick up where I maybe missed, but also just in general support the show, even if we're not going to take that shot live.
Yeah, and apart from being an aid to the broadcasters, I think it's also an important tool for directors, allowing them to get themselves another look at the play, maybe a better look than what they originally chose to be their main camera for that play, further aiding them in telling that story.
Yeah, there are a lot of moments in which I'd like to see something again. I hear it all the time where the director will tell me, hey, let's see it again from the tape room. And even if he doesn't want to put it live exactly, he just wants to see what's going on and figure out if it's worth putting live. right? So as replay ops, I always try to give him an abundance of information and an abundance of replays for him to choose from. He gets veto power, right, in the end, but I always try to throw out as many as possible because, again, the director is ultimately the person who's telling the story visually speaking. Right, the commentators factor more into the audio side of things, but visually, the director is the final say on everything. So providing as many opportunities for them to develop and craft the story to how they want to do it is another kind of additional goal of running.
Yeah, and I'm going to go back to something that Caden mentioned a couple minutes back. And it's the Peoria Riverman game that he worked replay at. That was in-house, right, Caden? There's definitely is a bit of a difference between doing replay for a broadcast to replay for in-house.
Well, I would boil it down into the division of, for broadcast, you're looking to add knowledge. In-house, you're looking to add emotion. Because the in-house crowd obviously is fueled by fandom and fueled by emotion and motivation to see their team do well, things like that. For the broadcast, you're looking to be as objective as possible on the broadcast, so you're going to provide information that is as objective as possible. Whereas if you're doing in-house, then you might show a foul that was maybe called incorrectly, just to kind of get the crowd going. You're definitely going to show them a big play, just because that's going to exacerbate the tension and the energy of the home crowd. So that's what I would boil down the difference to.
And as somebody who hasn't done the replay in both settings, I've only done replay for in-house. However, somebody who works production for both the in-house shows and for the and a broadcaster, the other element to echo what Josh is saying isn't just emotion versus knowledge. It's when you're in that stadium, your job is to be you paid to go watch that game. So we don't really need to show you different angles of an all right play. If you're in house, we need the fan to get back into the game. I mean, talking from a production manager perspective, we want that replay because we want the fan to get on their feet and make more noise. At home, we want to slow things down, get a cooler secondary angle, enhance the story versus the complete opposite in person. You're supposed to already be watching the entire picture on your own. That replay is just to get what we want out of you.
Josh, we've done our fair share of opens where we've had to assemble multiple pre-recorded clips and warm-up footage for the broadcasters' opening statements. And those opens, it truly opens up the opportunity to get creative with the footage that you use and what you don't use.
Yeah, opens are the start of the broadcast, the very first couple minutes where they kind of do a general opening to the show where they talk about the main headlines and kind of set the scene. So the basic theory is that you go kind of funnel style into the show where you start super broad. You show usually a clip of the city that they're playing in or the field or something, fans walking, like something super broad. Then you narrow down into the specific headlines and the storylines that are going to be prevalent throughout the game itself. So the theory of the open from a replay perspective is to match that. So you choose clips at the beginning that are scene setting. Again, those wide shots of the stadium, of the city, of the crowd, things like that. And then you narrow into specific shots of players and specific storylines from there. So the rule as a replay op in those situations is to mimic that and also choose something that's pretty attention grabbing off of the start, something that does an accurate job of depicting where you are, and then something that kind of catches the eye and gets someone interested for them to then get hooked by the storylines that commentators sell and discuss further along the line.
Yeah, I don't know if you mentioned it, but drone shots are awesome whenever you're doing one of those opens. Especially drone shots of either the field or the city. It just looks great. And we've used our fair share of drone shots. Josh, I think you've actually recorded some footage while you were at Bradley, right? You went through the campus and recorded some footage?
I did. One time I took a little GoPro, it was about this big, and I walked around campus and I attempted to film just different parts of it, but my hands were shaking because the camera was so small that I couldn't keep it still. So the footage didn't turn out very good, but we get a laugh because that's still in the archive somewhere in that big folder that we pull a bunch of clips at the beginning of every Bradley broadcast. So they're still in there. Occasionally I'll use them just for old time's sake. There's a great one of me standing in the flag circle where I put the camera on the ground. You can see my face and I kind of walk away, and then our director was supposed to cut that part out, but he didn't. So we have to scroll past that every time we use that in reality. But it was fun.
Yeah, I've definitely used some of those clips before, and some of them are a little shaky, but I think you got some good footage there.
A for effort.
A for effort, exactly. But going back to the opens and everything like that, I think that's truly where storytelling comes into play. It's being able to just make sequences of action, especially baseball or softball, where you have every inning. You could do some sequences of action and, get a shot of the pitcher, to the batter, to if it's an out, you get the out, or if it's a home run, you can get the home run as well. But it's almost like you're an editor or a movie director. You're really able to cut and move clips around until your vision becomes reality.
Something that I really enjoyed experimenting with over the last year was going into a break, was putting together like a super quick little highlight reel that was basically exciting play that just happened, and then capped off by a slow motion shot of someone celebrating. Especially like the more zoomed in, the better. And it was really just up to whatever the camera ops gave me in that particular moment. But those shots, or those highlight reels, I should say, were some of the most interesting ones that I was able to work with and develop and improve on in the past year.
Yeah, it's kind of like the NFL Opens where they put like the crowd shots. Not the opens, but whenever they're going to break, they put the crowd shots celebrating.
A little bit of color, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Adds a good amount of color to the broadcast, but that aspect of replay is what really allured me to the position and why it's one of my favorite to this day, and just the opportunity to be able to make something really cool while further telling the story of the game. It really makes the position really special. But just moving on now, I wanted to go over some of our stories from our replay days. Josh, you mentioned this before, but you said a couple episodes back that the most memorable broadcasts are never necessarily the best broadcasts. And that's the case with what I'm dubbing flags, the Bradley soccer replay mishap. Do you mind shining some light on that, Josh?
I do mind, actually. That was a classic. Long broadcast, rain delay in the middle. It was Bradley soccer. Rain delayed. The entire broadcast would probably start to finish, 3.5, 4 hours for a show that's usually 2 hours. So, long day. At the end, I'm getting ready for the rollout. I put enough things together that I'm pretty ready. And so I'm about ready to go. And all of a sudden, a fight breaks out on the field. It's something that you don't see very often, at least in collegiate, Missouri Valley Conference soccer. So I'm like, oh, this is amazing. So I scroll back, I get ready, and I'm still to this day not entirely sure what happened. Sometimes the machine that we use in particular, if you click on kind of the clip section and you aim for a certain clip, the entire list, as soon as you click on that section, will shift all the way down. So when you click on it, it'll like automatically jump to one of the top clips and you'll play that. So I'm guessing that's something related to what happened, but effectively we got ready to show the first fight and only fight to this day that I've ever seen in Bradley sports, or at least had the privilege of being on the broadcast for. And I showed a clip that I got from pregame for the open of the American flag. And so Rodrigo was actually, I believe you're the play-by-play commentator for that game. He goes, I think we're about to see a clip of this, and it's just the flags. And I couldn't find the actual replay, so we just had to awkwardly leave the broadcast there and trudge off air with our tails tucked behind between our legs. So yeah, that was one of the more memorable shows, you could say.
Yeah, that was an interesting experience right there. Like you mentioned, it was a 2-hour rain delay. It was already a late game. It was a late day. I was on the call for that one, you're right. And yeah, the fight almost broke out. And I was like, we're going to see a replay of this great fight. And flags.
No.
Beautiful American flag right there.
You did not get to see the fight. No fighting for you.
No, we did not. We came for a soccer game, not a fight. It made for a memorable moment. I think it really encapsulated the whole experience of that night for the 2, 3 fans that were maybe watching the game. I don't know
It
how
was a
much.
perfect note to leave off on, given all of the wacky stuff that had happened that day. It was fitting.
Josh, before we go real quick, do you have any other memorable moments, stories from the replay world?
I have one that I'd like to share just to negate the negative light that I just put myself in. So I'm going to throw someone else under the bus instead. There was a baseball game two years ago now, I think, and our director is a little bird crazy. He really enjoys getting shots of any type of winged object. That includes planes. But in this case, he decided to do a little bit of a game show. It was a duller game. So we came back from break. I threw together a playlist that I kind of recorded of 3 or 4 different shots that I had gathered of different types of birds. And the 2 commentators we then tested to see if they could identify what species of bird that was. So one was like a mourning dove, one was like an eagle or a hawk or something, one was a pigeon, I don't know, whatever. But so they're guessing and we're moving on through the clips. And they didn't know, but at the end, I was able to snag a picture of our very own Rodrigo Perez flapping his arms like a bird. It was an excellent cap off to the clip, and I wish we could dig up archival footage of it, but the commentators did not see that coming. They were like, I think that one's a hawk, probably. That's just Rodrigo. And so that was a pretty fun moment.
To give some context, Josh, I was the color commentator on that game, and Drew, our director, he talks back to me during the commercial break, hey, we're going to come back and you guys are going to guess birds. And we were both just not really with that kind of mentality. We were both like, we can talk about baseball still. That's still going on. And he's like, no, we got this really cool bird package. And so they wanted us to guess, and I'm just there. Owen was excited about it a little bit. My play-by-play, he was making his guesses, and I'm just like, yep, that's whatever. Sure, it's whatever. And then we get Rodrigo, and we're like, oh, it's the flying camera operator.
Can you do that for us, Rodrigo? Can you demonstrate what you did?
Yeah, sure. So I'm on camera. I was on the third base side in the dugout when I get not a call, but Drew, our director, just tells me, hey Rodrigo, can you just start flapping your arms? And I'm like, sure, why not? So I just start flapping my arms, and I'm like, and he's like, great, thanks. And I'm like, okay. I don't know where this is going, but
the best part is that it had to be done in front of the entire home dugout. That was my favorite part, is that everyone just turned and watched this strange cameraman doing the chicken dance, basically.
Yeah, pretty much. And then I think I was able to see it because we have a little monitor there that's able to show us the replays. And I think I was able to see it.
And it's there for replays for those umpires when they want to challenge a call.
Oh, we would never use those nefariously.
Of course not. But yeah, that was probably one of the most interesting broadcasts I've been a part of. But I think those are the baseball broadcasts. They're so much fun. They're long days, but you get those interesting nuggets and stories of just these really interesting things that happen during a regular collegiate baseball game. Well, everybody, it was a really fun episode talking replay operators and replay machine with you all. It's, like I mentioned, one of my favorite positions, a position that we've all have some experience in, and it's just a great storytelling mechanism for any sports broadcast. Caden, Josh, any final words about replay operators, the replay machine? Any more bird stories?
No more bird stories, but yeah, replay, every position in a broadcast has the ability to tell the story. Replay is unique because it's the only one that lets you do it apart from real time and kind of just look back in the archive and see what you got. So, unique position.
Yeah, to echo what Josh said, you may not have that shot you're looking for. You may wish you could go back and grab it in real time, or just in general, you wish you could go back and you could have it. But all things considered, the replay is an extra element that you don't necessarily need, as Josh brought up in the beginning of the show, but it being there just takes the broadcast up 3 steps a minimum, no matter how little or often you utilize it.
Very well said. Well, boys, thank you so much for joining me. Thank you, everybody else, for joining us and watching episode 3 of the Broadcast Podcast, our journey into replay operation. Join us next time as we continue our journey into the sports broadcast production world. Thank you so much for watching. Subscribe, like, and we'll see you all next time.